Okay, well, welcome everybody to the Wednesday webinar series that Key Ministry hosts. I'm Catherine Boyle, Mental Health Ministry Director, and today we're going to be talking about another COVID-related topic, and this time something that has been very difficult for people who have loved ones who may live in retirement communities or have elderly loved ones. COVID has just complicated everything. So we have invited our good friend Tory White from All Belong Center for Inclusive Education to come talk to us a little bit about dementia, some of the challenges that are involved with dementia, and just some tips on helping families, caregivers, and individuals who are living with dementia as well. As we're all trying to make sense of everything in our new COVID upended world. So Tory, thank you so much for joining us. And Tory's had an eventful day already. So she was just sharing a little bit about her husband has passed a kidney stone or had surgery to help get rid of a kidney stone today. So thank you so much for joining with all of that, going on in the background. So before we jump into your presentation, and thanks for sharing on the screen right now, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about All Belong Center for Inclusive Education.
Yeah, thanks so much, Catherine. We're just so honored to be a part of this series. I know I've chimed in and watched many of your webinars this summer and throughout the pandemic and everything, and even in years past. I mean, Key Ministry does incredible work, so we're so thrilled to partner and at any point that we can do that. So so I'm Victoria White. I serve as our coordinator of church services and a consultant for churches through All Belong Center for Inclusive Education. And so it's just my passion to be a part of including people of all abilities in worship. And All Belong's vision is a world where communities are marked by belonging for persons with varied abilities. And so it is just my joy and my pleasure to be a part of all of those things. So I get to coordinate things with churches. We do trainings, we do in-person and virtual consultations and presentations and webinars like this. And of course, during the pandemic, we've had all sorts of interesting opportunities change. So we've been a part of conferences in new ways and been talking to churches about how are you innovating worship at this point. I mean, everybody's kind of got to make it up as they go in many senses. And so it's been so great to have the network of people that we do between educators and special education services and creative minds and worship leaders and pastors and volunteers and people from all different parts of Christian ministry coming together to say, how can we do this well? And I've been so thrilled to learn more about some techniques that we would normally suggest just as a part of what we call universal design for worship, to try to create sort of a level playing field for everyone to participate in congregational life. And that looks different now, but it's exciting to see that a lot of us are also learning, oh, we can actually do this now because we've been forced to learn the technology how, and so it's really expanding our ministry opportunities, and that's been really exciting to see. So,
yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and that discussion has very much been that way as we've discussed dementia. That's been a growing passion and place where we've been doing a lot of learning in the last couple of years and a lot of trainings with others as well. And to see, right now is a very interesting time to be walking through the journey of dementia with families and our congregants that are aging. And then how do we reach out as ministry and outreach to people who are probably going to be the last ones who have visitors allowed in or are allowed to leave their homes for obviously health and safety reasons right now. So definitely something for us to be thinking about. So thanks so much for bringing up this topic and for thinking about it. And again, having ministry leaders think how we can do this well, and having sort of all of us just be more aware of how we interact and what interactions we're being intentional about doing. So.
Yeah, and it's, even if you don't have an elderly loved one who has dementia, I mean, COVID has forced you to think more like people who have loved ones who have struggles, who have vulnerabilities that maybe you hadn't thought about before. So yeah, it's really it's been amazing how rapidly we've all had to adjust the way that we approach interaction with others, and be much more intentional about the things that we're trying to do and to communicate. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So if you don't mind just kind of giving like an overview of what dementia is and what it is not, perhaps, just so the viewer is understanding what exactly we're talking about when we bring up the term dementia.
That's a great plan. And that's always where we want to start, because I think there are a lot of different perceptions that can float around out there about dementia and what exactly we're talking about. So let's just sort of lay a little groundwork, shall we? So dementia is really an umbrella term used to describe a range of symptoms. And quite often I encounter people who are a little confused as to whether Alzheimer's is the same thing as dementia, whether they're two different diagnoses. And it seems to be in a few years ago, Alzheimer's was sort of one diagnosis and dementia was sort of a different phrase. But now it's been pretty well understood that dementia is just the umbrella over it all, and Alzheimer's is one form of dementia, but there are others. So you can see on this diagram that there's vascular and Lewy body and frontotemporal, and there are a couple different other ones. This graphic lists a few other things that can cause what would fall under the umbrella of dementia. And so what we're really talking about is a change, and it is a change in the brain, both structurally as well as what we might term cognitively, right? So we're talking about the actual muscle of the brain, that the physical form of it is changing due to the effects of dementia, as well as, of course, the functionality of it, and therefore the areas of thinking that get affected by it. So I just want to kind of do a quick overview, like you said, to help us all see what we might see changes in. What does it look like when someone with dementia has these changes happening? So it's great to have a label and say, oh, we know what we're talking about. You have an Alzheimer's diagnosis, which is a form of dementia. Well, that's great. Now you have some labels, but what does that really mean, right? What do we see in a person's behavior and how our loved one is now sort of living life differently? So the way that you'll see changes, number one, is in memory, right? We're going to see things changing in terms of what is remembered, how well it's remembered, how accurately it's remembered. And that's short-term memory, of course, but also some of those long-term memories can start to get a little fuzzy and maybe relying on maybe pictures we've seen of an event or things like that. I know some of the classic scenarios are like driving with mom in the car, and all of a sudden she starts just yelling, "You've got to go back. We have to go back to the store. I can't find my wallet. I must have left it there," because she didn't remember she had set it on her lap and then reached for something else and got disoriented, right? And so those types of memory scenarios, as well as the scenarios with my grandma talking about, my dad's childhood and how he always went running all over the street with all of his friends all day long and didn't want to come home, where those memories have been a little bit, not fabricated, but sort of pieced together based on some other stories and may not necessarily be true to history anymore, right. But that's how her brain is sort of processing those memories now. So you'll notice, of course, changes in what is remembered and how it is remembered. Something else that I found interesting is that vision can be affected. And so, and this isn't, all of these things coming up, it's not an actual change in that sense. So it's not the eyes that are failing, right? But it's the processing of vision that changes.
So, not macular degeneration, not glaucoma, right. Cataracts.
Right. We're not talking about the changes happening in the eyeballs or the neural pathways between the eyes and the brain. We're talking about the brain's processing center of vision, right? Which, those diagnoses can come along with this as well. So there can be multiple factors happening. But what dementia itself tends to do to the vision is to sort of give you what I like to call the batter's box. I was a catcher for years and played softball and baseball. And so what happens is this field of vision tends to get to the point, whoops, sorry, I'm bumping buttons here, so that the peripherals are not perceived as well or processed as well. And so if it's not sort of in your strike zone, then it's not going to come through very well. And so that can lead to people being surprised when something comes at them from the side, or trying to sort of get at the level of what is to be looked at, or noticing things that are only within that strike zone. So wherever their eye level is what they're sort of perceiving. And so just changes in vision can definitely be a factor to this. And then social responses get to be a little bit different, and that can go a couple of different ways. I know, for example, someone who has been an insurance agent for years, or a pastor by profession for most of their lives, there are a lot of those sort of social interaction phrases that they may rely on more heavily to sort of carry conversations. So some of that, oh, well, you know, yeah, that can be the way it is. Some of those just little phrases that tend to become habits might be relied on more heavily, but also you'll see some social responses like etiquette just starting to fall away. So, you know, when family comes over for dinner, it probably isn't appropriate, but they don't think of it. And so, wow, you've gotten fat since I saw you. You know, just those types of phrases that the social filters tend to be fading away. So you can see that as a change. Something else you'll notice, and this kind of falls again towards some of those social responses, but the words that you're looking for. So what ends up happening quite often is we call it word hunting, when it's sort of like you're going into the filing cabinet of the brain to try to remember what that word is that you're trying to think of, and you just keep finding words that get you sort of close to it. And so the technical term for that is circumlocution. You're sort of talking around the word that you're looking for to try to get to it. So again, you might see some reliance on some of those little chatty phrases to carry a conversation because they can't come up with the words that they're trying to say, you know, I'm doing great today, how are you? They're just sort of going, well, that can be the way it is sometimes, yeah, you know, and just sort of relying on whatever it is they can remember to say. A couple of other things that sort of go together are impulsivity is going to increase, and a loss of inhibition. So just not really being shy about things anymore. You know, if that cookie looks delicious, boy, it's just going right in the mouth. Like there's no asking if everybody else is having cookies yet, or, you know, oh, that wasn't supposed to be for me, or any of those types of things. Just a lot more of sort of the impulsive behaviors. And again, just sometimes losing the awareness of what's really appropriate or inappropriate and what those lines are. So you'll see some of those types of changes happening, and it's a progression, right? But always remember, this is in the processing of things. So it's not that they're losing their eyesight or those types of things. It's how the brain's processing these things. And some of those words and some of those memories can still be there, but sometimes it's just how they get accessed now has to change because the processing is what's being so affected. So just, it was helpful for all of us as we were sort of learning some things about our own family members, and as we've been working with churches and ministries and thinking about how we connect with individuals and families as they go through their dementia journey, to just continually remember that it's in the processing. It's not in the physical, you know, changes of vision or touch or things like that that are being affected. But we can rejoice that there are some areas that are not so affected by this. And so experiencing pleasure, God still gives us that gift, right? So there are lots of ways that we can experience pleasure with one another in social interaction. And again, like those foods and those favorite things can be a great joy. And perceiving threats, right? So we think that part of the brain that's sort of in the back of our brain that is our survival mode is what allows us pleasure and notices threats, right? So those are the two things that very much stay alive and well and sort of thriving and operating the system, if you will. So, so as we think about that, I came across this study that was just phenomenal. And so this article mentions a study by Dr. Jeff Anderson, who's in the University of Utah, who discovered that music and participating in music actually activates parts of the brain. And so as we're talking about those areas of the brain that are sort of protected from being so changed by dementia, this is one of them. And it's the reaction known as ASMR, which is sort of like, suppose we could just call it the goosebump effect, right? So when you see a gorgeous sunset or you hear a song that is sung so beautifully and it just gives you chills because it's so beautiful, that's actually a proven reaction that happens in our brain, that we're experiencing such pleasure that it literally lights up parts of our brain and causes that chill effect throughout our body. And so what we found is that in individuals with Alzheimer's and dementia, is that part still lights up. And so if we think about how music can sort of transform that place in which our brain is processing and activate that light up pleasure center, that can change how we think about some of our opportunities and interactions. And if you think about what we're all about with worship, that starts to get really exciting. In fact, in that study, they mention that quite often people saying that they really sensed the Lord moving during worship time while there was praising and singing happening could very well be explained as those parts of our brains that are literally lighting up and being activated and causing us that physical reaction. And I don't say that to say that God in the Spirit isn't moving. I think that's very true, right? That there is move of the Spirit, but I think that God built our brains this way to also, even just in the act of participating in singing and praising him, as he says, everything that has breath, praise the Lord, right? I think he built us this way to actually have sort of a part of us that maintains that level of joy when we engage in it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I thought that was a really key piece for us to just sort of hang on to as we move into this.
I love this, that there's a study that can show that phenomena, because you do hear over and over again about people who have even severe dementia who will still be able to play the piano and sing songs, or maybe it's only a couple of songs, but that's just such a lovely thing that it's been scientifically demonstrated how that's working and where it's coming from.
Absolutely. Like I said, I think that gives us something to hang on to and to say, all right, we have something that we can use and enjoy. And I know that there has been even secular studies about, singing some of the simple songs from a person's childhood to really engage them and bring them even out of what seems to be a stupor that they would live in and, not even sort of look up at people anymore, but you start singing that Jesus loves me, and all of a sudden they're tapping along and starting to engage visually, and it's pretty incredible to see the transformation happen. So there have been a few articles and some things happening around this topic that are really quite beautiful.
Yeah, so we just got a comment in the chat that that a gentleman saw this in his mother at the end of her life when she had dementia, that apparently she was still responsive to music, and he just said that he loves it, that dementia doesn't take that away from a person. So that's very encouraging.
Absolutely a great gift to be able to use together. So one of the other sort of comforting things, if you will, about dementia, because it does seem to have so many variations and things that seem to come and go, but there truly is a predictable timeline to it. I know from my experience with my grandpa and with my colleague Barb, who we often do this presentation sort of together, her father passed away a little over a year ago from his journey with dementia, but you'll see that it really does progress over a course of about 8 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. And I'll get into a little bit later some more resources that gives a lot of great specifics about what that truly looks like in different sort of phases of it and what you can expect. But it's of course different in each person, depending on not only their own personality and interests and activity levels, but also on what areas of the brain may be experiencing more changes at different times and how quickly their brain can sort of shift to process that in a slightly different way and still achieve that goal. So, but it is predictable. It does progress over about 8 to 10 years normally. And so there's evidence to say that once you know what it is and have kind of been able to diagnose it and develop an understanding of how this is going to go, you will be able to see the progression predictively. So that is a little bit helpful. But I think the thing that we really want to talk about, right, And so
Right.
how are we equipped to do something along this journey to stay connected with families? Because the thing that breaks my heart, and I see it so often, is in a congregation, you have an aging couple, or particularly if you have an individual who now lives on their own. And then this individual develops dementia. And there are, of course, some different phases of being diagnosed and identifying what's happening. And sometimes before the diagnosis comes, people are noticing changes, or it's getting harder to interact, or they just simply stop coming and begin to self-isolate, partly because it's just scary to try to attend church anymore because of all the sensory input coming at them, and how to process the information and interact anymore and remember who's, who you're talking to, or what you're supposed to do next, or all of these things. And so what I see so often is that in this journey with dementia, people just get more and more isolated, and the church has a hard time staying connected and engaging as community. So we really want to try to equip people to make sure that that's not what the common story is. We want the story to be supports and ministry all through the lifespan, right? Because there's, and each person, and I know, Catherine, you said this has to be a huge focus, and I totally agree. Each person still has a gift to give to the community.
That's right.
As long as each of us are breathing, right? God has purpose here for his kingdom work. And so there's still things that we can learn. I remember in my grandpa's last days, he was still giving us things that he had written so that we would know. I mean, he did a ton of research in our family history back into our French origins as far back as Napoleon. And, so he was still passionate about passing on some knowledge to us. And I think that that's key for us to remember too, is that even though sometimes the stories can be confusing, or you have to get creative with how to communicate, it is still important to listen and to care what this person has to say and what they have to share. And like, if music is still a joy, you would be astounded at some of the singing that can happen. I was working in actually a memory center. We were doing a Bible study, and we sang some songs together. And the group of people who was gathered here had all grown up in sort of the same tradition. And so they knew many of the same hymns. And the music cut out on our YouTube video that we were following along to watch the lyrics for a little bit. And you wouldn't have known it stopped, because they were harmonizing. It was like we had a choir in the room. And the caregivers who worked at the facility, their jaws just dropped, and they went, "What are you doing? This is incredible." How is this whole group of people who normally, walks around with pretty blank looks on their faces, or not knowing even how to say hi to each other, like they're singing this amazing hymn together and harmonizing. So such gifts still to be given at every point in life. So Absolutely. How can we be equipped, right, to access those? So do you want to dive into that, or do you have other questions?
Yeah. I mean, I think we probably should. And I mean, also focusing on how, families and people who love individuals with dementia can be equipped in this time of COVID, because it has been definitely more difficult to be able to personally interact. So we just want to be able to share, some tips that you guys have as really leading thinkers on this, about how to stay connected in a safe way, so that you're not harming your loved one or yourself with whatever, connection that you're able to continue making.
Absolutely. Yep. So let's dive into a few strategies. And these are just going to be a couple of quick general ones that we've sort of learned with churches for the last couple of years. And then we'll focus on some that we've learned and seen working really well, particularly during the COVID situation. So a couple things not to do would be to just get louder. I know quite often, for whatever reason, that's like our natural reaction. If it seems like they're not quite understanding us, is we just talk louder, thinking it'll make more sense. Right. And they're probably actually bracing themselves for the trauma that you're now doing to their ears, and probably their hearing aids if they have those, or their senses in general. So don't just get louder. That's not going to be helpful. And the other thing that I think can be particularly easy to do for ourselves right now is to say, oh, well, they're having a bad day, so I think I'll just leave them alone. Or it's just kind of rough, they're not feeling up to it, let's not talk today. And I would just say, let's not fall into that trap, because if that if that pleasure center of their brain is still hungry, and you could be the smile brought to their face today, isn't that worth a phone call? I mean, it could be that the bad day gets turned around because you come and interact. So I would say don't let those bad days scare you away. Definitely continue to reach out and move past them. And you may have to use a few extra tools in your bag on that day, or it may be a shorter visit that day, but that doesn't mean that it isn't going to bring pleasure to that day. And like I said, it could turn around that bad day. So let's not fall into the trap of sort of the excuse of, it was a rough day, let's just not try.
Yeah, and I would just want to say here, make sure you're taking care of yourself, because you got to take care of yourself before you can take care of somebody else. But you know, it's important to stay positive and encouraging when somebody is having that bad day, if you will. So anyway,
and it does take some energy. Yeah, definitely. It does take some energy to be the one to sort of carry the conversation, right? So absolutely. Right. I know I've talked with a few people saying, what can you do for yourself in order to be ready for this? And if you have to shorten the time, that's fine. A 15-minute visit that's positive will work wonders for both of you. If you need a cup of coffee before you go, if you need to chat with a friend before you go, have a chocolate bar waiting for you when you're done, you know, just to, again, take care of yourself and build yourself up to be ready for this and to be prepared, because caregivers do. You've got to take care of yourself in order to help anyone else. So a couple of things to remember, and this is, again, going to feed us just as much as the person with dementia. But let's remember, right? God has said that he doesn't look at the things man looks at. It's easy for us to stop at what we're seeing. But man looks at the outward appearance and the Lord looks at the heart. So let's look at the heart and look at the value of each person. So a person with dementia has all of these labels and all of these places of things that are changing in them, but they're still a member of the body of Christ, an honored member, right? This person is still salt and light of the world that God can use for his kingdom. This person is still indispensable and important and an image bearer of God and a dearly loved child of God, a heaven-bound traveler who is secure in Christ. So let's just remember that frame of words and put that loved one in the center of this picture. And remember that this person has a frame of words around them that God has given. And so let's just remember that as we remember who this person is, right? This person is valuable because God says so. Right. So let's honor this person when we approach them as we remember these things. And I think that becomes important because that helps us to reframe how we're approaching someone. So it's no longer a chore to come and have to say hi to someone that is our duty to say hi to, right? We're approaching an image bearer of God. So that's helping us to frame who we're approaching. So that helps us to think through a couple of tools to bring. A simple one is if you're in person or if we're on video like this, simply put a name tag on. It says, hello, my name is Tory. And honestly, even if it's your mom or your dad or your brother or your sister or a good friend you've known for years, put how you know them. Hi, my name is Tory and I'm your granddaughter. Right? Like, let's just take some of the mystery out of it. And if it's right there in the strike zone, right, on our shirt there, that just makes it easy. So, because you don't want to have to walk in the room and say, hi, do you remember me? I mean, let's not have that conversation, right? Just introduce yourself with your words and have it visually. So there's no need to rely on memory to do that. So just introduce yourself and keep it there visual. Have pictures ready. Just bring some pictures along. I know sometimes picking a theme for the day is great. So you know this person grew up on a farm, bring a photo album or a magazine about farms and animals and just talk about what you see. And if they have memories of things, that's great. If they don't, simply talk about what you see. Again, having visuals is a great tool. And if you put it right within that strike zone so they can see it clearly and flip through it, then that's going to allow you to have a conversation that lasts longer than the 10 minutes that you might be able to come up with without having some kind of visual with you. And technology allows us some great tools for this right now. Like an iPad allows you to resize pictures and to zoom in. Right. You could bring your family photo album in there or the latest picture of the puppies or whatever. And of course, who do we always look for in a group photo? If you've got some group photos, you can zoom in on this person or allow them to zoom in on who they want to see, right? So again, allowing an inroads to communication here. So iPads have been a great gift, or those tablets. I think like an Amazon Kindle is so easy to set up and use. So some of those are great. And that's sort of thinking more about those in-person interactions. But technology is going to allow us some different conversations. So we'll talk about those in a minute. Something else that we found is such a helpful tool, and I know many care facilities, particularly those that are faith-based, will have one of these around. It's just a prayer shawl. And so when it's time to pray, you just pull out that prayer shawl and even just set it on them or allow them to hold it. It's a way for them to participate in praying together. Or maybe you want to ask for prayer and say, would you help put the prayer shawl on me so that we can pray together? And then, you know, again, it's just allowing that tool of physical interaction to bring some concreteness to the time. But those have been just a wonderful thing to have. Or even, do you have a little cross that they can hold as you talk about what God has done for you and things like that? You know, having a physical object to hang on to is a huge gift. Now, we talked about how worship is such a wonderful thing that we can hang on to, right? And I think it really does actually give us like a common language to speak of, especially for those who have been brought up in the church when they were younger. And those are a lot of the memories that are being retained. And so I know some churches that are using their church choir in a creative way right now. So during the pandemic, everybody's at home, but what they'll do is they'll have a choir member make phone calls, and they each have sort of a list for the week, but then they change the list so that it's not the same choir member calling the same people each time. So the recipients of the call get to hear a different singing voice, but they're singing favorite hymns from their traditional worship service. So they just know that today is hymn number 342, and they're going to sing it on the phone to this individual.
That's
and that
wonderful.
has brought such joy to individuals. And then, you know, maybe they'll talk for a little bit or pray together. But again, it's like, so here's a common language. I'm just calling to sing to you today because that's what our choir is doing right now. And so there's your conversation. And how does that brighten the day for an individual to hear a familiar song, hear a friendly voice, and to know that their church is reaching out to them? That's brilliant right there.
Yes, that's a great idea.
Yeah. So if you have a church choir, put them to work right now.
Right.
If you don't have a church choir, I mean, give me a songbook. I'll sing something,
Yeah.
you know? So I think this is just fantastic. So that's a great way of using that common language that worship has allowed us to. And I sort of already alluded to this story, right? When I was in the memory care facility and how we would sing these songs, but truly people came to life during our times of worship when we were gathered in this small group in a memory care facility. And the other thing, and the secular studies aren't going to show this for you because music, of course, brings that little light up zone in the brain. But the other area of the brain that is completely protected from this is the part for prayer. I heard individuals who we thought, all right, we're doing this Bible study with, you know, a group of people we know have dementia. What's going to happen if we ask somebody to pray in our Bible study group?
Right.
Let's see. John, would you like to pray? Oh, yeah. Now, John had said about 3 words over the course of about 2 hours before this. You ask him to pray, and all of a sudden he comes out with 5 full sentences introducing us to the Lord's presence, to our Bible study, thanking God for the chance to dwell in the Word and for a chance to worship together. I mean, it was just astounding. And that's when we realized something magical happens here. Prayer is one of those things that I have seen is protected from the effects of dementia. And that's really got me incredidible. And that's got us really thinking about some of the opportunities that are available for prayer in a lot of these settings. And this was in a Christian group home that is like right outside of a seminary and very focused on care for the spiritual aspect of a person's life as well. But even there, not all of the professional caregivers are Christian. Right. They may not be comfortable leading prayer at mealtime, certainly not at bedtime or waking hour. When you have individuals who have grown up their entire lives, many of them had been pastors even. Right. So their day was bookended by scripture and prayer, and their meals were bookended with scripture and prayer. And so to just take that completely away from them, first of all, is actually removing a pretty comforting routine that's going to help them get through their day and know what time it is and what needs to happen. But so what are the tools for that, right? So we've been doing a lot of thinking about that now, and I've been talking to some pastors who have also got relationships with different group homes and assisted living facilities, and maybe who normally would do a service like once a month in a memory care facility or something. And so I think there's your great opportunity to call in and say, hey, I know it's lunchtime. Would you put me on speakerphone so I can just pray for lunch? Some things that we're wondering, would your church be willing to commit to either calling in, or could you somehow get some video that's recorded that they have access to? Or does someone have a smartphone, or does the facility have an iPad that all they have to do now is push play, and there's a prayer for mealtime, there's a prayer for evening time, some things like that would be really easy to take the pressure off the workers, but to provide that support for those individuals who thrive and rely on this on a normal basis. So that's something to definitely think about broadly as the church and how we can minister, but also, again, how individual communities can interact with one another. So
question for you, are you aware of any churches that have done one-on-one prayer with people similar to what you just described, with choir members calling and singing?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep. Prayer over the phone, or even standing outside the window, right? I know one of the techniques that my parents have used too is show up outside the window with a big whiteboard so that they can write messages and even call on the phone while they're standing out there, so that there's a couple different modes of communication that are possible. But depending on how the hearing aids are interacting with the phone, maybe grandma can say something and then they can write their answer on the board and show it to her and things like that, and dropping gifts at the door and saying, we love you, we dropped this off, things like that. But yeah, definitely, pastors, now is your time to shine in terms of some personal calls to people, or have a ministry phone tree of people willing to make those phone calls, just so that they're hearing that the church knows and cares and remembers you. Right? Absolutely a time to shine in ministry that way. And again, keep it short. I'm going to sing a song to you. We'll pray together. If you have anything you want to talk about, that's great. 15 minutes.
Right.
You can do that. In fact, I think later on I have even a phone script that's available that we've created just to help with that. So just as we're doing for the sake of time, I want to move through a couple things and we'll get to some of those other resources. But keep in mind as you're interacting, and this can get tricky over the phone, to sort of listen for those things, but behavior is communication. We talk about this a ton in our education classes and working with kids and children's ministry, but it's very true with a person with dementia as well. So you always want to interpret behaviors with a good sort of detective eye, to say, all right, what are they communicating to me right now? What might be an unmet need, right? Is there hunger, thirst? Do they have to go potty? Is there something uncomfortable that they don't have the words to express right now? So anytime you're encountering those behaviors that seem aggressive or difficult or sort of hard for you to understand, definitely keep in mind that they're trying to communicate something. And so asking some of the gentle questions to see, are you thirsty? Would you like something to eat? Is there something causing you pain? Can I help you? Those types of questions are going to help you get through behaviors much more than trying to stop behaviors from happening or talking about what they are doing, right? That's not going to be a great, helpful conversation. Something that I've seen churches be really effective with, and they're getting creative now in the pandemic era, but wraparound support teams. So just making sure that there are some peers and others in the church who are staying connected with this individual, this couple. Again, like I said, it can be such an isolating time when you're going through dementia as a family. And so to make sure that you have some wraparound support, which means a couple of other families who are regularly checking in. And so that might mean that it's the couples getting together, the ladies go for coffee while the men sit together at home with him if he's the one with dementia. Or it's that regular phone call just to stay connected, particularly if we're not showing up on Sundays every week, right? So somebody who knows what that day-to-day life is like is willing to drop by a meal or organize some meals for a couple of weeks, or is helping with the grocery shopping or house cleaning or yard work or whatever it might be. Again, to just say, we're here for you, and if you have some needs, we're going to make a team effort to get those things done, so that, again, that caregiver person is not always getting burnt out trying to solve all the issues, right? So this is ministry to the caregiver almost more than it is to the individual. But wraparound support is what we call that, and I've seen it take many, many forms, and people of all ages. I actually did this presentation at one point, and somebody came up to me afterward and said, I love how your example was of couples who were all the same age, and one of the couples was going through dementia and they were still good friends and stayed connected. But what about me? I'm a young single person, but I would love to be a part of a care team, so don't rule me out either. And I thought, that's exactly right. Like, let's stay open and connecting people of all abilities, ages, and stages together, because that's what the body of Christ is all about. So I like to say,
and this is a great example of for how to come alongside a family that's going through maybe a catastrophic health crisis as well. And naturally you're maybe going to expect that your better friends are going to be helping with that, but there may be many people in your church community who would like to come alongside and provide support there as well. So just throwing that out there.
Oh, absolutely. And if you can use tools like a Caring Bridge page or things like that, even mealtrain.com, I think, has an option to sort of expand what the needs are and how to support a family and what the story is. And of course, that means being willing to share, right? We have to admit that we're struggling, that there's something happening. We have to be willing to sort of identify that there are some areas we need support. And I know firsthand, I've had a care team surround my entire family for years, that it's hard to receive help with grace and to accept that the person who got your groceries got you the wrong kind of lettuce, or, the people who signed up to bring you to the doctor's appointment suddenly have something happen and they can't bring you and your doctor's appointment needs rescheduled. And it's hard to be so dependent, but that's also sort of how God designed us to be, in community and dependent on Him and on one another. And so there are gifts of grace within this, and I think it's a wonderful tool that I would love to explore more with anybody who wants to talk more about that. But wraparound support is a vital piece of, I think, the church health. In fact, I like to say that a wraparound support team is simply the church being the church. If we think about sort of the root of what the church is. And so again, that just brings us back to the idea that we've got to be supporting caregivers. A lot of times, once you have sort of a diagnosis and a plan and you know what's coming, the person who actually has that diagnosis is pretty well cared for, and all the focus gets to be around them. And it's the caregiver who really needs, that little care package or that phone call or the hymn sung to them to say, the light of the world is still shining for you as well, right? So, so let's make sure that we are supporting caregivers and families in that way. So there are some great resources out there for caregivers. I know the heartofthecaregiver.com. I know you had guests not too long ago that were incredible. The Chronic Joy, amazing sets of resources. So I'd really encourage people to look into those to support caregivers. And again, anytime that you hear a diagnosis or that that a family is struggling, I would say, as church leaders, let's ask how that person is doing and what they might need. But then right away, let's say, so who's taking care of them? How can we support them? And build some support around that.
So I just want to throw out real quick, if you've got any other questions, or any questions actually, please do supply those in the chat, either on our Facebook live stream or here in the webinar itself, because we've had all this great information, but we're coming up on the hour here, which is amazing. So, don't miss this opportunity to ask Tory whatever questions you have, particularly if you have a situation that you'd like to see addressed, where just caring for the person, getting care yourself if you are the caregiver, is made more difficult because of all of the COVID limitations. So
yes, absolutely. Reaching out is hugely important, especially right now.
Yep.
So a few things, like I said, that we've kind of learned during COVID especially, is that packages are a fabulous way to reach out, whether it's in the mail or at their door, like what they're calling yard bombs. Mm-hmm. Just to say, I'm thinking about you, and here's a pack of Oreos, because we both love those. Right. And I know that in different states, for example, my friends up in Seattle were saying for a while they couldn't even drop packages off They had to go through quite a screening process, whereas others, you could deliver in the yard and then wave at them from the window and things like that. So, we have to be respectful of what our authorities are saying is safe for our area, but those packages can be hugely meaningful and not lots of stuff, right? We want to be mindful too of the fact this person lives in a pretty small space usually, and lots of stuff just tends to be overwhelming. But what can be useful? What are they allowed to eat? What do they enjoy eating? Is there a picture to remind them of something? A quick note to say, hey, I enjoyed being with you when we did this. This is our favorite song. What does that person love, right? That's the question to always keep in mind. What do they love to do? What do they love being a part of? And how can you include some items that speak to that? So packages are a great way to do that. And again, those phone calls, right? Just that phone call to say, God wants to sing over you today. I mean, scripture tells us that. And so phone calls are a huge gift. And especially because this group is probably not going to be your most tech savvy group. So right. The fact that your church has their online worship streaming happening and Facebook groups happening is fantastic, but it's probably not reaching this person for ministry. So phone calls are literally a lifeline for social interaction. So in those phone calls, here's what I was talking about, that we do have a couple of resources that we actually created because we knew this is a big deal, right? So how do you kind of get through these awkward phone calls sometimes, or how do you start if you've never done this? And so we did actually create a phone call guide that you can use, kind of walks you through, if you've got 15 minutes, here's what you can do with that 15 minutes and some words you can say. There's even sort of a script for a prayer that you can share. Of course, modify everything as needed, but that way you've got something. Sometimes it's so helpful just to have a script in front of you to get started. And again, especially if you as a church maybe are trying to work sort of a phone tree or something, and you're calling 3 different people, and so to have a script to address each one within a 15-minute conversation can be really helpful. So, and I've used this, like I said, even with my own family members as well. So I found this really helpful. Something else that we've found helpful is there's actually a picture prayer to go along regarding COVID and how we are dealing with it together. And so it's just a nice, simple prayer. So I put that link on here, and it's also in the handout that I gave. So again, right, visuals, if there's any way to engage together with visuals, that always helps, just that the meaning to come through all the more clearly. So if you can add pictures with your words, that's super. But if, again, you're still over the phone, again, this is just another version of a prayer that you can use to speak over the phone. It's nice and simple and easy to understand.
Is that something that you also have on your website? Is this visual?
Yep,
okay.
Yep.
Wonderful.
These are all on our COVID-19 resources on our website.
Excellent.
So here. Yep.
And we'll put that information on the description of the video, of this conversation when we post the video on the Key Ministry YouTube and Vimeo channels.
Excellent. Yeah, you're so great at sharing information.
Thanks.
That's wonderful. So something else that we have come across that I thought was also an absolutely brilliant idea was how many churches are having to change what their Vacation Bible School looks like this year, as well as their ministry with
all of them. That's the answer.
Yeah, right, everybody. Yep. Right. And so we've worked with a church who, on a normal basis, would have a summer camp that took place at an assisted living facility. So that meant that their 4th and 5th grade group did their summer activity camp for a week in an assisted living facility with people who lived there and the residents. And it was a blast for everyone. So the activity coordinator at the assisted living facility thought this was the greatest thing ever, and all of the residents did too. And so now there's relationship between those kids and those residents. So this year, rather than being able to participate in person, they've been doing drive-by parades. They've been doing pen pals together, whether that's over the phone or written between the residents and the kids, since they already have relationship. But that sort of spurred some other brainstorming with churches going, well, okay, if we have to reimagine Vacation Bible School anyway, we're also trying to reimagine ministry with individuals who are in these assisted living facilities or group homes, or just people who are isolated at home. Why don't we just use both of those things together? So Vacation Bible School now is about ministry interaction with people in these isolated spaces. And so we're making care packages, we're making cards, we're stopping by, we're doing a dressed up parade in our cars or on our bikes, or we're decorating the space outside. We're showing up in their garden and waving at the windows, and they're decorating their windows to say hi to us. And so it's creating this interaction between generations that's just a beautiful thing. And so how can you engage the families in your church and the kids, and what's happening with your VBS in this as well, so that it truly is the entire community, and it's not just this one family who has a family member in the assisted living facility, but it's all families in the church, right? And so how can each family be doing something? I know a lot of churches are sort of sending some materials and saying, well, we can't hold VBS in person, so if you want to do it at home, here's the stuff to do it, and we'll support you in doing that. And here's a Zoom link, and we'll connect and things like that. So can the families sort of start to get involved in this, right? And as a family of kids of different ages, each have their own gift to bring and way to make someone smile. Could you even record yourselves on video and then bring the video with you if you're a little shy in person and don't want to act out the Bible story in person at the residence facility out the window or whatever, and show them the video while you're standing there? Lots of great ways to get involved.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned using this in group homes too, because I think it can be a challenge for churches to know how to successfully engage with group homes. And so, these are all great ideas that can be used to help, get the whole family, get the whole faith community involved. And from that kind of creativity only comes more creativity. So I was talking with somebody this morning, and one of the silver linings of COVID is how the church has been able to minister to people that have been isolated and maybe have had difficulty getting to church for whatever reason. And so now, there's a lot of new community that's been established, and, let's keep that momentum going and make sure that, as we come out of lockdowns and restrictions, over the next year or so, then, let's see how, these relationships can continue to flourish. So
right. Absolutely. And one of those ideas has been, so if your region has been sort of let loose to have small group gatherings, so maybe now you can gather 5 to 10 people who aren't from the same home, and now you can have small groups. Well, could you do that with a group home?
Right.
Could you have your small groups in a group home now? And would that allow for that relationship to thrive? And now you're just having Bible studies as a regular practice in a group home, and you've instantly created all kinds of bridges and relationships between different people within your congregation. And so that's one of those things we were actually trying to work on that before the pandemic hit, and sort of developing, equipping people to be able to have Bible studies within group home type settings. And now we're saying, okay, well, that may be what the phase into reentry would look like before they can come all the way to church. And before you can really have large group gatherings, in some senses, can you have those small group gatherings in those places? And so a tool to do that I really encourage people to check out is called Together Curriculum by Friendship Ministries. And just togethersmallgroups.org is the link to it. This is what we used when we were doing a Bible study in a memory center with a mixed group of people and then with a group that was mostly people that did have dementia. And it was phenomenal. The imagery, the fact that there are videos so you can watch a Bible story play out in front of you and then talk about some questions together. Things are very much like thumbs up, thumbs down type responses. So it's very easy to engage. There was always some type of object, lesson, or a physical thing that we could tangibly touch together and talk about. There's always a take-home page. There's 2 different versions of it. So there's one that's a little more words-based and then one that's more picture-based. So many options. And I just love this curriculum because it's so full of options. And so it's been a very helpful tool. And I've heard from many group homes and people that had been using this curriculum before things all had to go virtual. And because it's so online based, going virtual with it was super easy. And it's been an incredibly effective ministry tool for people. So I'm encouraged by that. Now, again, right, we go back to those groups who have very limited technology access. this is going to look different
Right.
when you do it in that setting. And so, but again, right, if you're planning for that time when you can get together and you need some type of curriculum or pictures or Bible story to think about together in that setting, this would be a great tool to check out as you start to plan for that.
So we are coming up on the top of the hour. So I just want to make sure that if last chance to get any questions in for Tory, but if you think of something later, be sure to reach out to Tory. The website is allbelong.org. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah,
they recently had a rebranding, and so this is their new revised logo and their new website. So it's allbelong.org. And the lady talking today is Tory White. So Tory, with just a couple more minutes to go, what are some concluding things that you'd like to share with our audience and in this season that we all find ourselves in?
Yeah. Thanks, Catherine. I just wanted to mention too, I was talking about Together Ministries curriculum, and you can get a free unit right now if you just type in this together. That's why I put that word up there. That's their sort of code if you want to get the free unit during all of this right now. And so just a sort of final idea is churches, if technology is the barrier for some folks, would churches consider donating that? One of the simplest things to have would just be to have like one of those photo frames that you can load with digital pictures and even videos in some of them now. Just load it all in there and then just drop it off for them. And there you've instantly created connection and ability to see something without them having to fiddle with technology. Or an iPad, right? I mean, how many things could the church set up and donate? Would you donate your time to be the tech support they need for them? I know if our cable went out or our air conditioning went out, a fix-it guy would probably be considered essential personnel to get all suited up and come into the home safely to fix that. So, could you also be considered essential personnel as the tech support to help them be able to have ways to connect with others? But I do want to tell you about a few resources really quick, and these are on the handout as well. So we've got some from All Belong. We have links to things like the Calvin Institute of Christian Worship and Friendship Ministries, and we have trainings available. We've done a course through the Christian Leaders Institute where we dive into dementia in one of the weeks of that course. And so there's a lot more information that we've been working with to support you working alongside someone with dementia. But some other great resources that are out there so you can learn more about what dementia is, what it looks like, and how we're relating our spiritual relationship and our lives together with that. Holland Home is a place where they have a memory care facility, and their handbook is available online. So there's a link to that. They also have a handbook for worship, which is all free PDFs that are out there. So I'd encourage people to look into that. Teepa Snow is an expert that we have gleaned a lot from, and she helped to write the Dementia Care Handbook for Holland Home. Her organization is called Positive Approach to Care, and she has books and resources and trainings available as well about dementia, what it looks like, how you interact with people, lots of great materials by her. Another one we found is Dementia Friends USA, and this is for anybody who simply wants to be more familiar with a person with dementia. So if you come across them while you're grocery shopping, you'll be able to help them get past that point of confusion and interact again.
Great idea.
That's a fabulous place for really anybody to get a little more information. And one of my favorite people on the planet, theologian John Swinton, was actually a nurse as well. And he's written a couple of books, Becoming Friends of Time, one of my favorites that I would normally read you a quote from when I'm doing the presentation on dementia, but you'll have to find it for yourself for this hour's presentation. But he also then wrote a book about dementia called Living in the Memories of God. And so greatly encourage you to grab those books and look him up online. He's got some great conversations and interviews as well that he's been recorded on online, but excellent resources which we have drawn from and which I encourage others to look into, just again to learn more about what dementia is. I mean, the 15 minutes I shared I'm no expert either, right? So don't take my word for it, but learn from the experts and get familiar with this, because as you said, the creativity that's been pouring out of the church right now is inspiring more creativity, and it's just astounding. And I'm so thrilled that God is equipping his people like never before through this pandemic. And I would just encourage you to grab that momentum and keep it going and learn a little bit more, so that this group of people who are living with dementia are not forgotten, and that ministry continues with them, not just to them, but with them.
Right.
Great meaning.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Tory. This has just been an incredible amount of information, and I just encourage everybody who's watching, do check out this link, do check out allbelong.org. We will have this presentation linked in the comments, and feel free to reach out to Tory or reach out to Key Ministry if you have any questions. You know where to find us online. We're at keyministry.org. Definitely follow us on social media to make sure that you're getting great content like this delivered, right to your news feed, or even better, sign up for one of our emails so that you're, getting notified when we're having new events like this. If you want to see what else is coming up on Key Ministry, the webinar series, be sure to check out our events page. We'll have a disability ministry roundtable discussion next week. So if you're interested in that, be sure to go register again at the events page on keyministry.org. Thanks so much again, Tory, for joining us, and we'll see you guys all back here next week. Thanks so much.
Thank you.